Would you be willing to change places with me? In life, I mean. I'm 17, fit, have my whole life ahead of me. I'm a super fast reader. I'm crazy about vanilla bean ice cream. I recently fell in love with snowboarding. I play a little ukulele and I sing. All the usual stuff. Oh, and I sued the Washington state government for a cleaner climate and won. On the downside, however, I'm a little disorganized. I don't clean my room as much as I should. My mom says I worry too much. I can't vote, and though I sued the government, nothing's changing. So I have my whole life ahead of me, but it's filled with melting ice shelves, monster storms, and air that's not breathable. You still want to change places with me? No? Well, that's understandable. After all, who would? No one wants to be in that position. My friends and I don't want to be in that position. But because we don't really have a voice in our future, we had to take things to the next level. So 7 of my peers and I sued the Washington State Department of Ecology. Granted, we made a pretty big ask, but it's a reasonable one. We asked them to guarantee a stable climate for the future, one that we can live in. It started in 2011 when we brought a petition to the doorstep of the Department of Ecology, asking them to update their emissions regulations recommendations to the Washington State legislature based on the newest climate science. However, they blatantly denied our request, claiming, and this is my favorite part, that they were not legally obligated to use science in their recommendations. It's ridiculous, right? So that same year, we filed the lawsuit. Our argument being that under the public trust doctrine, our government has a constitutionally mandated responsibility to protect those natural resources, to preserve and enhance them for future generations. If you're not familiar with the public trust doctrine, it's a legal principle that simply states the government has a duty to protect certain natural resources for future generations. And among those are the air, the land, the running water, the sea, and consequently the shores of the sea, that they need to hold those for posterity. Posterity is a fancy word for future generations. So I'm going to roll with that for a moment. Everybody in this room, imagine that you can talk to somebody from the future, let's say 2050. And you can ask them all about how your actions now affect their lives. Get that image in your mind. Now stop. Because you don't actually have to imagine I'm standing on this stage. And it's true, I'm not from 2050, but I'll definitely be alive then. So technically, I'm the future. King County Superior Court Judge Hollis Hill agreed. We won our lawsuit against the Department of Ecology. She applied the public trust doctrine and counted us as part of the public. In her ruling, she said that the survival of our generation depends upon the will of our elders to stem the tide of global warming, before doing so becomes first too costly and then too late. But, and there's always a but, we got a super strong ruling from our judge, and nothing happened. We got a rule from the Department of Ecology, but it was so weak that those that don't believe in climate change would still probably approve of it. And climate change and us, we're on a head-on collision with earth-shattering consequences. Don't use our ports as docking grounds. We don't want that in the sound. Keep that oil in the ground. There's a danger up ahead. Drilling Arctic oil means disaster for all human beings. Do us right, revoke the lease. There's a danger up ahead. There's a danger up ahead. Now, I've never been what some people would call a normal kid, whatever that means. Between the ages of 7 and 10, I had a morning ritual. I woke up every morning at 6:30. I got ready for school, and then I listened to NPR while I ate my breakfast. And listening to those NPR reporters talk about melting ice caps and disappearing polar bears was sad, but it was so far removed from me that I never felt I could do anything about it. And that feeling actually changed when I moved to Seattle in the spring of 2011. And I got involved with a youth-led group that plants trees to try and mitigate the effects of global warming. I went to one of their day-long workshops that they call academies, and there I learned about the effects of climate change on everything, not just the polar bears. And being there with all those kids that were all in the same place to do something about climate change left me feeling inspired. And planting trees became my first step into activism. But my future is at stake, and I knew that. I knew planting trees wasn't enough. I felt like I needed to take stronger action, but I was stuck. I didn't really know where to start, and I needed something to kind of give me that jump start. That came when I was asked to write and give a speech at a protest against exploding trains coming through Seattle. We call them exploding trains because they literally explode. In case you didn't know, oil trains carry about 30,000 gallons of crude oil every 77 seconds in the US. That's 39 million gallons a year. And the oil is volatile. Under the right conditions, it explodes. To this day, they pass under downtown Seattle. And speeches were not my forte. I'd never given a speech, and I had literally touched an ukulele 3 days before I was asked to give the speech. And I decided to write a song. It's a simple song. Mind you, I was 12 at the time. And, yeah. Please don't send exploding trains through our cities. We don't think that people dying is pretty. Think about the future generations. Think about the lives they live. Think about your children's 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 children. Think about your children's 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 children. The warnings of impending doom aren't always as obvious as an exploding train. Sometimes they're really small and easily overlooked. A temperature change of only a few degrees in ocean water is enough to upset the balance of the whole world's ecosystem. A nice example of this is coastal grizzlies from northern Washington up to Alaska. You usually see like some stock photographs of them with these huge salmon in their mouth that they just caught like fresh from the river or something. And that's pretty great. But recently we've seen those same grizzly bears catching Humboldt squid. Yeah, squid in Alaska. And the problem with this, it may not seem like a big one at first, is that when grizzlies catch salmon and then they take them inland and eat them, and they don't finish all of the salmon, they leave their leftovers there, it feeds other small scavenger animals and then decomposes and feeds the soil and the forest. And the reason it can do that is because salmon have really fatty, rich fatty nutrient reserves. But the squid don't have that same kind of nutrient-rich fatty reserve. So the soil isn't as fed and other animals aren't as fed. The problem with this is that over time, eventually with more and more nutrients leaking out of the soil, and especially with the rest of climate change going on, the forests being taxed, your forests start to die. You lose your habitat, you lose your small prey animals and predators, so on and so forth. Our atmosphere is kind of in the same situation. Our temperature is at a 1 degree average of warming above what it was before the Industrial Revolution, approximately. And our atmospheric carbon levels are about 410 parts per million. You don't have to worry if you don't know what that means, just know that the number is far too high. And the small effect part comes when we start talking about our tipping points. At about 2 degrees, is what scientists call a tipping point, where we really can't go back. So one more tiny degree. And the thing is that without any regulation, we're definitely on track to hit that number by 50-50. 2050. 50-50. What am I thinking? Definitely by 50-50, everyone. I won't be alive then. Like I said, we'll be on track to hit that number by 2050, causing irreversible climate damage. Things like the total thawing of permafrost, causing erosion in the land, destruction of the tundra, and further warming of the planet. Because of the increased heat in the atmosphere, the loss of our glaciers and snowpack, meaning you'll get increased flooding in the winters, but drought in the summers. And it poses a threat to human lives. I'm not an activist because I have a passion for standing in front of official buildings and shouting for change. I'm an activist because I recognize the danger to the air I breathe, the water I drink, and the land that grows the food which I eat. When I started this work, I thought it was about saving the planet, and what I've realized is it's really about saving us. The idea is that I'm not fighting against climate change, I'm fighting for human change. The ability of our species to change places with another, see their plight, hear their voice, adapt, and make better choices. I believe that we need to change our ideas of home, to kind of get out of the boxes we call houses and into the real world. When we step outside, we need to see each other and remember who the future is for. Because right now, we seem to have forgotten. My generation is not heard in a political sense. And because of that, I'm willing to use the courts to amplify my voice. In 2015, I filed the lawsuit against the federal government with 20 other youth from around the country. It's very similar to the state lawsuit, but it's much bigger and there's a key difference. In the state lawsuit, we were asking the court to affirm that the public trust doctrine existed at all and that the government did have an obligation to protect our rights. Because we got that affirmation, we're able to step up our argument in federal court. Now we're arguing that the federal government has known about climate change for over 50 years, and they've known about the dangers that fossil fuel use and the destruction climate change would bring. But they've acted against that information. In doing so, they've violated our rights, the public trust. So the first thing that happened when we filed this lawsuit was the motion to dismiss. The government claiming that just because of the public trust doctrine wasn't enough to bring a lawsuit, and we didn't have standing. And our judge, Thomas Coffin, disagreed. He recommended that we go on to trial. Then there was the appeal to the motion to dismiss, and also denied. Our judge, Ann Aiken, she said in her ruling, "Exercising my reasoned judgment, I have no doubt that the right to a climate system capable of sustaining human life is fundamental to a free and ordered society." I agree. Now, that leaves us with two questions. What if we win? Well, if we win, that day that a ruling is handed down from the courts, it'll create a feeling of relief and hope that is palpable. You'll literally feel it like emanating off of me. And the reason for that is that I will finally have been heard, and my generation will have been heard, and that change will start to happen. But I want to remind everyone here that the battle for change at that point is not going to be easy. It's still going to be hard, because we've waited too long without action. And the second question is, what if we lose? I don't believe that a single person in here, not for a minute, I don't believe, that anybody here wants us to lose. And I know that it's hard to agree on policy, implementation, regulations, all of that stuff. But you can't turn a blind eye to the future anymore. Like I said, I'm standing on this stage. You don't have to change places with me. Just hear my voice. Support it and believe it. Thank you.